This is likely to be long and rambling and fairly incoherent. Just a kind of very crudely edited stream of consciousness. So, I've been up half the night and I'm very tired. From watching everything to do with Manchester unfolding, all the confusion and the hurt and the upset and the. I hate to say it, but the same old pantomime that happens every time there is one of these terrorist incidents. The confusion, the speculation, the condemnation of the speculation turning out to have been right, the crowing, the capitalization on what's happened. Concern more for the people who have essentially caused this to happen, more than for the victims. It's just all so banal now, so regular, so predictable, so boring. It's the people who make jokes, the reaction to the people who make jokes, the people who make it about politics, the people who react to those who make it about politics. In this instance, the suspension of general election campaigning. You know, the one who made it political was the cunt who blew himself up and took 19 people, including kids amongst them, out during a general election campaign and just before Ramadan. Given the date, given the nature of the attack, which is apparent suicide bombing, I don't think there can be any real question as to where or what the culprit comes from. Let's start with the jokes, I suppose. So it's attributed to Stalin that he said a single death is a tragedy, but a million is a statistic. And I think to an extent we're seeing this play out with the way people are making jokes. A lot of people are very remote from this. It does form part of a broader, larger war and terrorism narrative. So, yeah, people are going to make jokes. I think it's a trifle insensitive, certainly, but I'm not going to condemn their right to make jokes. I don't think anyone should be fired for making an off-colour joke. I don't think anyone should be censored from making off-colour jokes. They should be able to make their insensitive jokes, you should be able to criticise them, and that is the entire extent to which anything should happen. But it's interesting, at least to me, to see the difference between the ways people have reacted to this and to the recent community tragedy and the kind of skepticism, the debate community, with the shooting by the skeptic feminist. That was much more personal, that was much more small scale. You know, these are people that we didn't know, but we've seen and we've interacted with, and so on. And so the reaction to jokes being made at that expense, especially from people who you expect to hold themselves to a higher standard, that has been more impactful for a lot of people, I think, in terms of this is unacceptable, you shouldn't make jokes about this, all of that. In the same way, I would say I would defend your right to make bad, stupid jokes, and I would defend people's right to criticize you, but nobody should be censored, lose their job, lose their channel, lose their social media access or whatever for making a bad taste joke. And I don't care whether it's about a shooting, whether it's about a bombing, whether it's about the Holocaust, whether your joke is racist, sexist, homophobic, whatever else. You should be able to, and you should not have any consequences in your real life unless you were doing it at work. You know, It's irrelevant. We've lost this line between our public and private lives. And it's entirely stemming from the way we react and the knee-jerk way in which companies and institutions react. And it's just, there was some reporter or other who made a joke about the bombings. Various other people have as well. And there's people calling for his job and calling for his head, and it doesn't make any sense. Some people cope with tragedy by using black humor, and apparently some people cope with tragedy by deflecting all their impotent emotional energy that can't stop or can't stop the bombing, can't reach back in time, prevent it from happening, can't help or save anyone who's involved. So they direct it onto attacking anyone who doesn't react in the right, socially acceptable way. That said, there are some things I think that people have done that have crossed the line into genuine harm, have met the harm principle. And those are things like creating tweets and so on saying, oh, my child is missing, and then putting up a photo of someone that's nothing to do with them, some kind of inside joke or a troll or whatever. And this not only wastes people's time who are trying to identify the missing, put people back in touch, it gets picked up by the media and ha ha ha, isn't that funny, they fell for it. Well, not really. It uses up space that could have helped someone else. Column inches, media access, phone lines. It's harmful to people who are trying to get back in touch with their family, find out who's missing, who's dead, and so on. That's eating up resources and time for a little childish counting coup. I think that is a step too far. So then the politics of the whole thing. Terrorism is political violence at the non-geopolitical level, I guess. It's not a fight between states. It's asymmetrical warfare or a problem with an internal group or something that wants something. And they leverage violence in order to try and get what they want. So you have to sit and stop and ask yourself, well, what do they want? But there's no escaping that it's political. It's not a matter of making it political. It's a matter of trying to understand it. I mean, looking back, you can look at the IRA and the bombings that they did, including ones in Manchester, and why did they do it? What did they want? They were trying to apply pressure to the British government to the point where it wasn't seen as worthwhile to hold on to Northern Ireland. They were also trying to threaten and make feel unsafe politicians, which is why they targeted assassinations and bombings at them. There was a goal, and that goal was Northern Ireland moving away from the United Kingdom and joining with Southern Ireland. So what's the goal here? And it's less distinct and less clear, not least of all because I'm forced to speculate, but I think it's fairly safe to assume that this is an Islamic terror bombing. So what is the political goal there? I guess the overarching picture is that we're involved in this international fight against terrorism, against ISIS, against other elements. So in some ways this is fighting back. They don't have bombers, they don't have tanks, they can't launch an Operation Sea Lion and invade the south of England. It doesn't work like that. So all they have is terrorism. So in a way that's understandable. You want to make this impact, and they're trying to create fear and horror and terror, and it's likely to succeed. Against the backdrop of the general election, it is obvious to anyone with the slightest understanding of politics that such a bombing is only going to strengthen the hand of the right-wing parties. So we're likely to see, in the wake of this, once polls and so on start up again, a boost for the Conservatives, a boost for UKIP, and a hit to the more liberal or left-wing parties like Labour and the Liberal Democrats and the Greens, because people are just predictable. There's an attack, they'll go for whoever it is that's saying they're going to be strong and tough on this sort of thing. The warmongers, the ones who are promising more security, to crack down on internet communications and empower the secret services to do whatever it takes to stop this kind of thing happening again. And that appeals to people on a short-term sort of knee-jerk way. But why would such a bomber do this, knowing that would strengthen the party that's going to crack down on them and do more against them? Well, they know as well as anyone does that such authoritarian crackdowns and so on are going to increase sympathy for them. It's going to make our society more repressive, more controlled, more spied upon, less liberal, less tolerant. The values that we have that stand in opposition to Islamism are the things that get eroded in our battle with Islamism. The very things we should be emphasizing are liberalism, our tolerance, our libertinism, our better quality of life, our openness, our rights like freedom and privacy and all the rest. These are things we should be emphasizing. They're the things that would long term win us these cultural battles that we're in. It's how we beat communism and Russia and so on. It's particularly stark in the way Berlin was split in half. People on one side could see the relative wealth and freedom on the other side, even if slightly at a remove, and could see that Western culture, in all its liberalism and tolerance and openness, was, I'm just going to say it, superior. And Western culture, Western liberal culture, is superior to Islam, superior to Islamic states, Sharia law, the massive repression and so on that we see in these countries, the control of women, the barbaric punishments, the horrific way that they treat homosexuals. I don't think that can be in question. No amount of moral relativism can escape the fact that if there is a system that is better for the flourishing of human happiness and opportunity, it's ours. It's not perfect by any means. We could improve it, but it's got to be better than a repressive theocracy. On the left, we have to acknowledge people's fears. We can't keep just calling people racist and xenophobic. There is a real problem with Islam. It's not just a religion, it's a political philosophy as well. Now, Islam isn't unique historically in this role. If Christians followed the Christian Bible exactly, wherever there were Christians would be as much of a horror show as Islamic-controlled states. Adulterers would be stoned, anyone who worked on a Sabbath would be killed, all the rest of this horrific shit. So we're fortunate in that the vast and overwhelming majority of Christians, like nearly all of them, are really bad Christians. When it comes to Islam, unfortunately, while the majority are still bad Muslims, and that's a good thing, because they're not following the letter of their book, it is unreformed. These regressive attitudes, if not necessarily the actions, run through Islam. If it was a raspberry ripple ice cream, it would be more ripple than ice cream. The approval ratings of things like suicide bombings and so on are shockingly high, even in Islamic communities in Western countries. And people will quite rightly point out that the West is bombing all kinds of places and has troops on the ground all sorts of places, and is fighting what some hyperbolic people will refer to as a new crusade or whatever. But millions of people marched against these wars. In our parliaments and in our political organisations, whatever they are, plenty of people, our representatives, voted against these things, didn't want to do them. There is a clear and visible sign that the populace, at least, does not approve of what is going on. And yet, we don't see anything like the same kind of mobilization against these horrors within the Islamic community. Instead, we see deflection. Why should I have to condemn something I would never do? Well, you'd never do it, good, but the rest of your community needs to know that you would never do it, that you think it's wrong, that you don't think it's compatible with Islam, and they need to see it said over and over again and extremely loudly. And yet, time and again, we see liberalistic reformers within Islam, or formerly of Islam, being marginalized and called Uncle Toms and race traitors and culture traitors and all kinds of horrible other shit. I mean, you look at someone like Majid Nawaz, who is honestly really trying to create this kind of reform to express and support a more tolerant version of Islam, and half the people attacking him are Western liberals who aren't Islamic, calling him these most terrible, awful, racist things. Porch monkey was one of them put forward. Yeah, we should be encouraging people like Majid, not condemning them. But this is the approach I think will, in the end, work. Not the kind of reactionary, knee-jerk, hate them all, or increase defense spending or constrict people's freedoms more, because those are the things we're supposed to be fighting for. But rather, we should be encouraging these kinds of liberalizations. We should be encouraging social change and technological change and advancement in these countries, because if there's one thing that we know is a moderating influence against extremism, it's democratization and wealth, a better standard of living. These are the things that eliminate this kind of extremism. That's what we should be encouraging. Imagine if we'd spent money doing that, helping develop these countries or supporting liberalizing movements within these countries, instead of bombs, $1 million a pop. Wouldn't that be better put to support liberalized opposition parties, or groups that support democratization, or moderate Islamic sects, or alleviating poverty, providing water, those kind of things? You could go a lot further and create a lot better change spending those things in peaceful, supportive ways than by bombings and war. This is a chance to... We have a chance to be compassionate and intelligent and thoughtful about this, instead of just bomb the bastards, which isn't going to help. It's just going to perpetuate the cycle. We brought an end to the Cold War really by being the superior, more liberal, more open, more free culture, and people could see that and they wanted it. We brought an end to the conflict with Northern Ireland by sitting around the table and having communication. These are the things we should be doing, not bombing people, or by threatening the very things that make us better. I don't know. It's just, like I said, it's all so inevitable and predictable and banal and dull. Because I don't think, my little voice on a tiny YouTube channel or a blog or an article or whatever else is going to make the slightest bit of difference. We all know how this is going to play out. We knew from the moment the explosion was reported how this was going to play out. That's what's really sad and really tragic about the whole thing. It's inevitability.